All right, we are live. Thank you for tuning in today to Side Dish Live. This is the live podcast brought to you from the Iowa Food System Coalition. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by longtime friend and mentor and colleague, Kamyar Enshayan, who is the recently retired director of the Center for Energy and Environmental Education at the University of Northern Iowa, as well as one of the founders of the Iowa Food System Coalition and involved in the drafting of our plan, setting the table for all Iowans. So, welcome, Kamyar. I'm excited to have you here today to talk about water quality.
Great to be with you. Great to be with you. Thanks for all the work you guys are doing.
No, thank you, and your support has always meant a lot to the coalition and to me personally. I think that um, I think we started working together in one capacity or another back when I was 20. So it's been 25 years now, which is amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so, as you know, water quality is a big top of mind issue in the state of Iowa right now. Maybe it's finally getting some of the recognition that it's deserved for decades.
Yeah.
At this point of maybe you felt in the past you're kind of screaming into the wilderness and folks weren't hearing and listening,
That's
but
right. That's right.
folks are paying attention now.
Yeah.
And so, let's start off with what are some of your major concerns with what you've been seeing? I know you've done local testing. I know you've just been involved in this for a long time.
So I'll just tell you from my direct experience what got me into this. I was serving on the city council in Cedar Falls, and I noticed that every other month a developer would come and wanted to build in the floodplain, and it would just get automatically approved. And I would say, "What? Building in the floodplain? I thought that it's just like it's not. It's going to push water on other people." They say, "Oh no, raise the level of you fill in the floodplain, and then you raise it 1 foot over the 100-year flood elevation, and everything is going to be okay." And I always voted no. Everybody else voted for it until the
Hmm.
flood of 2008 happened, where a whole development that was brand new had 4 feet of water in their living room. And and then I started learning from people who have been studying floods in Iowa. I started really totally digging into floodplain management and water quality during floods. And it turns out that DNR had done measurements of floodwaters before 2008, during 2008 floods, and after, when they looked at the sediment, what was left in the sediment in areas that were flooded. Well, as you can imagine, if you build in the floodplain, lots of people's garages, living room, basements,
Hmm.
everything that's in those places are going to end up in the water.
Right.
Fertilizer, fuel, motor oil, you name it, chemicals. So they were just like, so that was it was just like amazing to see that in a playground, in a town, there is benzene in the soil, there is benzene and atrazine and all kinds of stuff in the floodwater that came through that town. It's really incredible. And so that was kind of my beginning of learning. Wow, this is just amazing. We got to really respect the floodplains. Floodplains aren't just to be filled.
Hmm.
So yeah, and I became very active and basically encouraged our city to develop a better floodplain ordinance, which was amazing. And we passed that in 2010. And surprisingly, very few towns in Iowa have done that. Iowa City did that, and Palo did that. Most other cities continue to fill in their floodplains and endanger other people who didn't used to get flooded but now might get flooded because we've taken the capacity of the floodplain. So my introduction to water in Iowa came from floodplains and and then realizing that the upstream land used to be a lot spongier than
Hmm.
it is now because we've altered because of the cropping system encouraged by federal policies have encouraged cropping systems that aren't absorbing. We've lost soil quality, and water should have been stored in the soil profile upstream. And that's
Right.
one thing I learned from hydrologists, that saying the best place to store water is in the soil profile. So we need to make it be stored where it lands. And I came across Wendell Berry's wonderful kind of golden rule for watershed. Golden rule for watershed management. It says, do unto people downstream what you would have people upstream do unto you.
Absolutely.
Right? Right?
No, and I think that gets in you're getting into one of the things, as a county supervisor, I've been really involved with two watershed management authorities, the Middle Cedar River and the Upper Cedar River. Both cover multiple counties, and the entirety of Blackhawk County is compromised by the two of those. Um, but one thing that I found really interesting in right when I started doing that work was that many of the same measures that improve our flood resiliency also improve our water quality, because it's all about slowing the water down, letting it stop, letting the nutrients
Yeah.
filter out, just as the same as if you capture more water upstream, that's less of an expensive flood wall that you've got to build downstream.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, that's totally. And those watershed authorities, those play, and in order to make large scale impact, we need large scale policies that affect lots of people. It's not just, well, one farmer did this, or come and look at my farm, which obviously we know those are heroic work that farmers are doing, that is just amazing, and they're showcasing what's possible. But in order with those watershed projects have rarely had enough funding to really make an impact. And it's really, you had mentioned in one of your talks, you were talking about how, if we want these are infrastructures that are infrastructures of resilience, like floodplain. And it's not just sitting there doing nothing. No, a floodplain is a critical infrastructure
Yes.
infrastructure in the times of flood. We should view it that way. And it's just, we're not, if we respect that, and cities viewing upstream the work that needs to happen, and a lot of people in town need to know this. Like, so I'll tell you two stories that recently are kind of, I'm so amazed by, is that while we were working on passing our own ordinance in Cedar Falls to making the 500-year flood elevation the regulatory flood elevation, that was what was recommended to the state legislature as well, that make the entire state
Hmm.
have a high standard of floodplain. Well, guess who was lobbying against that legislation? League of Cities. The very cities that were flooded were fighting against that legislation, and in fact they killed it. That's why nothing has happened. And it's just like astonishing, saying, well, you guys were so affected by these floods. We, well, there's conflict of interest, right? They want to develop some of these floodplains.
Right. Right.
Right now, I'm seeing it along 20, where the dog track was in Waterloo. That whole area is totally floodplain if you look at the map, and it's being filled. And it's tragic, because it's just going to damage other places. And so, I want to come back to this drinking water quality and the connection. I'm seeing the cities not being, again, at the leadership of this. They weren't at the leadership of this for floodplain. They should be, for better floodplain management. The cities should lead it, but they haven't been. And the same with water quality. So we have everybody struggling with nitrate in their drinking water.
Hmm.
And I've never heard our city or any other city, except the city of Des Moines, raise the alarm at this pattern around us that is giving us high nitrate. they should be leading it. They should tell the people of their community, look, things are okay now. But some of our wells are getting more and more and more fertilizer in them, and we need to do something. Again, cities are like silent, and I feel like this is our best opportunity to kind of mobilize Iowans to point out that better agriculture does not have to be a polluting enterprise. It can be a healthy enterprise. We know from years of long-term studies at Iowa State and work of many, many farmers, we know that we can have a productive agriculture without use of heavy, extreme amount of fertilizer and pesticides. So, but we need to scale that up. How do we do that? We need to have a conversation. Cities need to know. People who live in cities need to know that there are good alternatives that we're not practicing.
Right. No, that's I want to pick up on that a little bit and also bring table food farmers into the conversation.
Yes,
Um, because there's, of course, that's what we're centrally focused on at the Food
yes,
System Coalition. But we know that in general, small scale and more medium sized table food farms, there's a much more intimate involvement in the land. Far less things like over fertilization, rather
yes,
than just spraying,
yes,
you know, loads and loads of manure and waste from confinements onto frozen fields or bare fields.
yes,
There's not that kind of over nitrogization going into the
absolutely.
production.
Yeah,
And so, we see, part of the solution be um, that there are just certain areas of Iowa that one should be returned to either wetlands, and there should be buffer strips, um, and retention ponds, and restoration of old streams and such. But also, that maybe some of these areas are more suitable for that medium scale farming that's got a little bit more connection to the inputs that are going into the soil.
yeah, totally. No, well said, totally. And yeah, we need more, particularly around cities and around these water, source water areas, source water protection. Cities could adopt that, and yeah, absolutely. I mean, most food crop farmers I know, um, they don't spray much. They're very cognizant of how they're producing the food and everything. And of course, again, we know corn and bean farmers who are doing the same too. It's
Hmm.
just that that's a tiny minority. And even again, the thing to remember is, from everything I've learned from agronomists, is that a two crop system is inherently leaky. It's
Right.
not, the most conscientious farmer cannot stop that. It's just the nature of a corn bean system. Unless it's diversified, unless buffers are added, unless there's a lot less corn grown, unless you do a lot of other things, the two crop system is leaky. It leaks nitrogen, it leaks pesticides, it leaks soil, and I would say we know from a lot of people I know, it also leaks money. It doesn't, it's just like it's the costs of
Right.
production are huge. Yeah.
So we've talked a little bit like that there are plenty of examples across Iowa of whether it's table food farmers or commodity crop farmers that are doing things the right
Yes.
way.
Yes.
But as you said, it's just not up to scale. Now we've got in the state of Iowa, we've got a voluntary nutrient reduction program. Part of that's centered around the creation of these watershed management authorities across the state. But those were never funded. And so even the voluntary effort, then requires further on, very limited resources of these, watershed coordinators to be able to match people up with the practices, match landowners up with the funding that is there is funding available to implement practices, and there's cost share programs. But I think we've been really limited by the voluntary nature, I think, of this program. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, I think the whole voluntary thing is such a, it's kind of a, it's impractical. It sounds good, So, but look at the previous public health successes that we've had. Let's say with lead. Did we say, well, let's do a voluntary approach. People should just be careful. Don't use gasoline that has lead in it, or don't use paint that has lead in it, or be careful, wash your hands. Parents should be careful. No, we didn't do that. We said, wow, this is a big problem. We're gonna change this. We're gonna remove lead from. So in this case, we say voluntary. When it comes to agriculture, we say, it's just voluntary. Whoever wants to do it, do it. Well, that's not going to work. It has never worked that way. But when it comes to forcing landowners to put pipelines, that's not, they didn't say,
Right,
we
right.
got to have voluntary pipeline. No, they're going to force it down our throat.
No,
So,
that's a good analogy to
and
make.
then the other important thing to remember, and Matt Russell reminded me of this, said, well, even for voluntary approaches, we're not even funding those. We had
Right.
we gave up $40 million of federal funds that would have helped. Farmers had already signed up. They're eager. Farmers are eager to do voluntary work, but we're not funding it. So it's like, the apologists for industrial agriculture constantly are playing both sides, saying, voluntary, but then we don't fund it.
Yeah,
And
that was the points I was um, getting to a little bit earlier. The if we were doing this full-throated voluntary effort, all these watershed management authorities would have had a coordinator paid for by the state
that's
that
right.
was out there making the relationships, and then so we could have accessed those federal dollars. But now we're even seeing those federal
Yes,
programs being
yes,
eliminated and frozen,
yes.
and so we're
Yeah.
just
So, yeah, the other thing to remember, people like to think, okay, well, we're just doing our local food thing. We just want people to buy local food. We want a good local food infrastructure. Like Iowa Food System Coalition, right? We want to do these things. But as long as the larger agriculture, as long as we're in this ocean of nitrate and pesticide drift, it's like impossible. Like water is so essential
right,
to life, to health, right? You can't have a state that is so with polluted water and have a local thriving local food system, right? It's just like we got to, I personally know three farmers that have been pushed out of business due to drift. Like pesticide drift destroyed their crops.
mm,
That's like livelihood of people.
right,
It's
absolutely,
amazing, right? You can't. So yeah, we got to, obviously not all of Iowa can be covered with local food. We need trade. We need to export things, obviously, but it cannot be at the price of, and it cannot compromise the ecosystems that provides life in Iowa. We can't compromise our own state for the sake of foreign trade. It just doesn't make sense. And
right. Let alone our health and our access to
yeah,
basic necessities like water.
exactly, exactly. And so in that's, I really admire the work of Iowa Food System Coalition, because that's where we can help Iowa. That's a starting point. We got to grow as much of our food as we can and invest our food dollars in the livelihood of farms around us who grow the food we eat. We need that. That needs to thrive. We have a lot of work to do, as you know. And we can't, and we need the help of everyone, and including, we got to have clean water. I mean, that's like, regardless of what we do, we got to have clean water, and we got to, all of us need to weigh in to make sure that we do. And it's not, here's one thing I really want to say. This is very important, because as soon as you start talking about the larger agriculture, people say, well, you're like, what did you say about farmers? Like, what did you say about my sister? What did you say about my mother? Right? No, we're just saying, look, a better system is possible. We're not pointing finger. We're not saying farmers are doing horrible things. All we're saying is the current pattern is causing problems. We need to identify what those things are, and we have alternatives to those, and we want to work on those. And it's so important to do this. It's not, we're not, nobody's saying farmers are evil, they're doing bad things. No, we know we're stuck in this. We know policies brought us to this point,
Mhm.
but we don't have to keep going that way. That's kind of
Yeah.
my thinking about it.
No, I think that's important to recognize that it's not really farmers that led us to this point. It's a whole system of policies, and in economics, that led us to this point. Now, a number of the communities that are first experiencing this water quality crisis in the state of Iowa are more sourcing their large parts of their water from rivers. Many people in Iowa still, receive their water from aquifers and such. But I'm not sure if you're aware that the state is now, for the first time ever, doing an analysis to truly understand how much water is actually under there. And so um, we might get to a situation where more and more municipalities and water systems, rural and urban, have to rely on other sources other than groundwater until we truly understand what's there. And so, just because this isn't impacting your community yet, doesn't mean that it's not around the corner.
and and there is another thing. So the quote unquote safe levels of nitrate were set a while back with infants in mind. Too much for them to consume something, and it's kind of um, like an immediate, what do you call? There's a word for it. I can't recall. Um, that would have an immediate impact on them, which is very different than chronic
Right.
exposure to lower level. Now there is evidence, and I shared it with our own water utility here in Cedar Falls. Now there is evidence that at levels well below 10 milligram, 10 microgram, no, let me see, 10 milligram per liter, um, they're associated with several kinds of cancer and several neurological uh, problems and birth defects. These are based on data in Iowa and from around the world.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is pretty serious, right? It's very serious
Right.
and it's a very startling thing for a community to think that, oh my God, our water is not safe or might not be safe, right? There is like, it just puts doubt in, it's just a troublesome thing. Like, and they're saying, oh, well, we're not gonna be able to recruit businesses and people to come to live here because we have water problems, right? Yeah, I mean, as in Iowa, we have water problems. We got to get
Right.
busy. We got to get busy, and so yeah, just to give you one example, I only know my town. I've discovered that there are 8 wells, and basically 1 to 4 of those 8 wells are in good shape. They're very low nitrate, but about 4 of them are reading higher nitrate. That
Okay.
now we're realizing maybe the standards are, so it's like, this is pretty serious. Like, it's not in some future time, and we can't like be in a bubble saying, "Oh, well, we're using groundwater, no problem." No, it's like, what about again? What about people who are drinking? Cedar Rapids relies on surface water,
Hmm.
and right there's just, and Des Moines, other people do, and also there are other living organisms that we
Very
share.
true.
This world is not just us. We can't have nitrate running through this. I mean, you can't swim in it. There's all these other problems, right? So, and not to mention the data centers and all these things. There's going to be lots of competition, for water. And so, I mean, water is foundational. People need to start thinking about and there's multiple. The good news is we know good solutions that
That's right.
there are lots and lots at many scales, from your backyard all the way to large scale farms, that we can have good solution. We just got to agree and implement and push for it as ordinary people who live in a town. Pay attention to find out about what's in your drinking water. So I'm very motivated to keep pushing in that direction.
No, I think that's a very good call to action for our viewers today. It sounds like you're saying this is an all hands on deck um, solution that's needed. And
Yeah,
so people can actually act at the local level, maybe request that their localities um, implement the 500-year floodplain maps instead of the 100-year.
exactly,
Is a
exactly.
good starting point, as well as supporting, yeah, good sustainable table food production in your community and across the
Yeah,
state.
yeah, yeah. And
So,
and again, the uh, Iowa State University, their agronomy department had done long-term studies of crop rotation, and if we diversify our cropping system in Iowa, it would have multiple wonderful benefits to the state. No, it would create better soil quality, spongier soil upstream, a lot less nitrogen use, a lot less
right,
pesticide use. So multiple health benefits. That's what my colleague Audrey Tronlam calls it, farming for public health. And that in that system, if we agree on all of these, and if we kind of push them, understand these solutions and push for them, we can actually, farmers can be heroes of this problem that we are facing. And again, cities appreciating their work, appreciating, and again, that change needs to come with good incentives. It's, people say, it's voluntary, but yeah, let's push voluntary. Let's subsidize voluntary. There's so many ways. There's so many ways. It doesn't have to be either regulation or voluntary, right? They're just saying either this or that. There could be a whole spectrum of policies and way approaches, that some of them are
right.
regulations, some of them are voluntary, some of them are just, there's so many.
And
And
at the end of the day, you've got to invest in it if you want it to work.
exactly, if our health is important to us as Iowans, if we want to go swim and fish, then we got to value that. And again, you can't grow healthy food and healthy livestock if you have polluted waters.
Excellent. Well, on that note, Kamyar, I really want to thank you for joining us here today. I want to have you back on down the road to talk more about data centers.
That would
Um,
be yeah.
we've got a lot to talk about there. I know you're
Yes,
passionate
yes,
and
yes.
knowledgeable on that. But this is a critical issue that the coalition is going to keep talking about, keep making that connection between our role as trying to create a local food system and how that plays into this water quality crisis that we're facing here in Iowa. I want to thank everyone for tuning in today, and thank you again, Kamyar, for being our guest.
Thank you so much. And again, I admire the work of the Food System Coalition. It's the best thing going on in Iowa. Very
Well,
hopeful, very hopeful.
thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Take
Thank you,
care.
everyone.
All right. Bye bye.